Notre Dame had one of the best pass defenses in all of college football last season, but I feel confident the Irish secondary can be even better this season. Find out why in today's edition of Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast, and today is Wednesday, August 21st. And thanks as always for getting your day started right here by making this your first listen of the day. My name is Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports, and I'm really happy to have you here with me today. If you are watching the full episode on YouTube, remember to like the video and subscribe. Or if you're on the go and you're listening to the podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you would give the show a 5-star rating, maybe even leave a review, and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. And this episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Okay, really excited about today's show as it is the final installment of my position preview series that I've been doing over the past couple months to get ready for the start of this season. I've enjoyed doing a deep dive into every position group on the roster, but the fact that we're wrapping this up means we're very close to the start of the season, which I'm obviously extremely excited about. The focus of this episode is all about the defensive backs. I lumped corner, nickel, and safety all into one episode, so there are a bunch of different things I want to talk about, including the star power of Benjamin Morrison and Xavier Watts, Tuadon Schuler being a surprise starter over Rod Hurd, and what I think Hurd's role will be in the secondary. And then at the end, I'm going to break down some of the younger players who might not play a whole lot on defense this season, but their development will be very interesting to monitor as it pertains to the future. But overall, when I look at this unit, I think they're going to be elite. Out of the 5 starters in the secondary, we're going to include nickel as a starting role in the defense for the purpose of today's episode because honestly, more times than not, Notre Dame is going to be out there with a nickel. But they have 2 bona fide stars in cornerback Benjamin Morrison and safety Xavier Watts. They've got 2 young players who are ready to break out this season in cornerback Christian Gray and safety Tuadon Schuler. Plus, they have a veteran nickel and Jordan Clark who can basically act as another coach on the field. Let's start off with the stars, right? Benjamin Morrison and Xavier Watts. They are going to lead the way for this unit. And the most important development coming out of preseason camp for Notre Dame was Benjamin Morrison's health after he had shoulder surgery in the spring. He is Notre Dame's best player, the most talented player, and they absolutely need him if they want to go where we all believe they can go this season, but it was absolutely necessary that Benjamin Morrison was out there and he was healthy from the very first game of the season. There wasn't a ton of information about how he suffered that injury that required surgery, but all that matters is from the very first day of preseason camp, he was out there and he has been full go from the start, so I am not worried about him going up against Texas A&M. Now, when you look at what he did last season as a follow-up to a freshman year when he was a freshman All-American. He didn't reach All-American status, but he still had an absolutely terrific season. He allowed just 25 receptions on 51 targets for 279 yards. That's basically nothing. He had 8 pass breakups and 3 interceptions, and he played his best in the biggest games of the season, particularly against Marvin Harrison Jr. What he did in that game, like when he's a first-round pick after the season, we are going to be seeing clips of Benjamin Morrison's performance against Ohio State in 2023. It was unbelievable. Notre Dame trusted him on an island several times against Marvin Harrison Jr. When Ohio State tried him, more often than not, it did not work. And I think that really opened everyone else's eyes around the country to what type of player Benjamin Morrison is. And I think the real question about Morrison now is, can he be even better in what is likely going to be his last year playing college football? I wasn't honestly sure going into the season because we didn't really know what his health status was going to be. I thought it'd be hard to be even better if he missed an entire summer and an entire camp as well. But considering the fact that he's been out there and it seems like he's had plenty of reps out there and he's ready to go for the season opener, I actually think he can have his best season as a junior. I think he can improve his tackling, some of his technique. We know he's very physical, but sometimes he can get a little grabby and that can lead to pass interference penalties. He has been a little bit prone to that throughout his career because he's just an extremely physical corner. But I think if he does that, if he improves his technique, he improves his tackling, he is going to be a first-team All-American this season, just like Xavier Watts was last season. Xavier Watts was a unanimous All-American last year, won the Bronco Nagurski Award for the nation's top defensive player, and everyone is so excited to see what he can do for an encore. His numbers were terrific. He had 47 total tackles, 7 interceptions, which is tied for the lead in the country, 4 passes deflected, forced fumble recovery for a touchdown against USC. He was great. But the thing about Xavier Watts and what he did last season was it was mostly the second half, because he didn't really turn it on into like an elite level until the Duke game when he picked off Riley Leonard, who is now Notre Dame's starting cornerback. Like, you think back to that Ohio State game, it was actually a pretty quiet day for Xavier Watts. This year, if he wants to improve on what he did last year, I think it just has to be dominant from the very first game all the way through the end. I don't think he's going to have 7 interceptions again, because teams just aren't going to throw his way nearly as much. Everyone knows who he is now. It's not a secret. He's not this surprise breakout player. All the opposing offenses are going to know who Xavier Watts is, and they're probably going to avoid him as much as they can. But that being said, he can still improve as a player. He has not even been playing in the safety position all that long. When he got to Notre Dame, he was a wide receiver prospect. And then after multiple position changes, he finally got settled in at safety. And I think a big reason why he decided to come back and play for Notre Dame this season instead of going to the NFL was because he knew that he could improve as a safety. And even if his stats aren't quite as eye-popping this year, I think he's going to be better as an all-around safety, and that is going to lead to a big improvement in his game and the overall function of the Notre Dame defense. Okay, so those are the 2 stars. Now let's talk about some breakout stars in cornerback Christian Gray and safety Adon Shuler. Christian Gray won the field corner job, as most people expected. I said he would win it back in the spring. It didn't seem like he solidified it then, but now he has in preseason camp, and that is not a surprise. We saw flashes of what he could be last season when he played as a true freshman, and he was apparently lights out in the Jersey scrimmage that just happened this past Saturday, according to John Bryce from Football Scoop. And it seems like at this point there is no debate over who's going to be the field corner. It is going to be Christian Gray, and he's going to take the vast majority of those reps. One of the most impressive plays by any Notre Dame player last season came from Christian Gray. He had an unbelievable interception against Pitt on the sideline. Incredible athleticism, the fact that he was able to pick the ball out of the sky, and then you saw the entire Notre Dame team just get so hyped for him. That was really, really exciting. And the fact that he was even out there last year was really impressive, considering what Notre Dame had at corner in Benjamin Morrison and Cam Hart. The fact that a true freshman was getting any sorts of reps with those guys out there is really, really impressive. And now Christian Gray is going to have to be as good as Cam Hart was last season in order for this defense to improve from what they were, and that is going to be a very tall task, because last year Cam Hart was a shutdown corner. He allowed just 15 receptions total on the year on just 28 targets, 137 receiving yards, 2 pass breakups, and 0 interceptions. But even though Cam Hart didn't make a ton of plays on the ball, it really just had to do with the fact that teams weren't trying him because he would blanket the receivers. So now Christian Gray is going to have to do the same thing. And now at safety, Adon Shuler, one of the biggest risers in camp, it looks like he's going to be the starter. I think he's going to split reps with Rod Hurd, who most people assumed, myself included, would be the starter going into the season. But it seems like what Adon Shuler was able to do in the spring and in the summer carried over into camp, and now he is going to be the guy starting Xavier Watts. At least that's how I see it as of today. Shuler doesn't have the experience of a Rod Hurd or what DJ Brown had last year for Notre Dame, but he is just more of a playmaker out there, and I think that's a big reason why the Notre Dame coaching staff is willing to put him out there, because if all things were equal between Shuler and Hurd in terms of their talent, then I think that the coaching staff would side with Hurd, just given the fact that he has played over 2,000 career snaps in college football. But I don't think it's even. I think Shuler has a bit of a leg up, and that is why he is going to be the starter, and I think he could have a breakout season this year. Is it going to be the same as what Xavier Watts did last season? Probably not. That would be pretty insane. If he does that, Notre Dame could win the national championship. But I think Adon Shuler is ready to have a big, big year. And then there's Jordan Clark, the starting nickel, fifth-year guy, son of NFL legend Ryan Clark. I admit I was pretty skeptical when Notre Dame added him in the transfer portal, but I think that he brings an element to this defense that is really important. The fact that he's a fifth-year guy, the fact that he can go out there, and he's not going to have as much pressure on him as he did when he was at Arizona State last year, and his stats weren't that great. He's going to be an important person to have. We know that nickel is a grown man position. You got to get in there in the run game, and you got to be able to defend the pass. Jordan Clark can do both. And then behind these guys, you've got quality depth with Jane Mickey, junior cornerback. He's going to be the third guy. And then another young player, Leonard Moore, who seems to be emerging as well. Those are really, really good options to have as your backup corners. I think Jane Mickey could have started for a lot of other teams in college football, but given the fact that Notre Dame has Benjamin Morrison and Christian Gray. That is not going to be the case, but he's still going to be very important, particularly in that Texas A&M game when it's about 1,000,000 degrees out there. Jaden Mickey is going to have to come in, make some plays. I think he's ready to do it. He had an interception returned for a touchdown last year against Pitt. We know he can make some plays. All in all, I just think this unit has everything you need to be great in the secondary. They've got the star powers. They've got the young players who are ready to break out. They've got veterans. They've got depth. They really have it all. And I think what Mike Mickens and what Chris O'Leary did as well before he left for the Los Angeles Chargers, what those two guys did in rebuilding this Notre Dame secondary is really, really incredible. They were great last year. I think they can be even better this year, and I'm so excited to see what they can do because it is a lot of fun having a shutdown secondary. The days of Gary Gray giving up back-breaking touchdowns are gone. This unit is a strength of the team, and they're going to be a strength again for the Irish in 2024. Okay, coming up next, I want to dive a little bit deeper into this Adon Schuler, Rod Hurd situation and why I think Hurd's versatility is going to have a big impact on this defense. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Whether it be sports, concerts, comedy shows, you name it, I love going to live events. And Gametime is a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. The great thing about Gametime is the curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever live event you want to go to. Just recently, I decided to go to a comedy show at the legendary Comedy Store in West Hollywood at the very last minute, but Gametime made it easy to buy the tickets, and I ended up having a great time, all thanks to Gametime. My favorite thing about the app, though, is you get a view from your receipt in the app before you buy, and then you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Today's episode is also sponsored by FanDuel. We've heard me talk a lot about FanDuel in the past, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you today. So now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. I honestly cannot recommend this enough. I've had YouTube TV for years, and it's great, affordable, and this Sunday ticket option makes it even better. What's better than watching your favorite team every Sunday? The ability to tune in to every other game to check in on your fantasy team while still having the ability to watch your favorite team. Football season is so close. I'm so excited. And FanDuel allows you to get in on the action like never before. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. After all the success Notre Dame had last season in the secondary, they had to reload at 3 positions. Safety opposite Xavier Watts, the field corner spot, and the nickel. We've already talked about it a little bit. Adon Schuler is probably going to be the starting safety, so they did that in-house as well as the field corner spot as well. But Notre Dame was very aggressive in the transfer portal this offseason. They went out, they got Jordan Clark from Arizona State pretty much right away. I think he committed to Notre Dame like 2 or 3 days after the portal even opened in the winter cycle. And then a little bit later on, Notre Dame went and got Rod Hurd out of Northwestern. And those 2 guys are going to be very important to the success of this team this year. So let's start with Rod Hurd and what his role is going to be. So even though I think Schuler is going to be like the 1A starter, Hurd is going to be 1B at safety, but he's also going to be an asset at nickel as well, even though Jordan Clark is going to be the starting nickel. The majority of Hurd's over 1,000 snaps last season for Northwestern were actually at the slot cornerback spot, a.k.a. the nickel. And when Notre Dame pitched him to come over and become a member of the Fighting Irish, they pitched becoming a safety and the option to play nickel as well, even though by that point, Jordan Clark was already committed to the Irish. Notre Dame needed another safety a little bit more because at that point, they didn't really know if Schuler was ready to break out. But then Schuler had a really impressive spring, summer, and now preseason camp, so now they feel comfortable with him. So now Hurd is like a luxury, right? He could play safety, and he can also play nickel. Because right now, I think technically Carson Hobbs might be the true backup nickel, but Notre Dame does not want to play a true freshman nickel. Like they tried that a couple years ago with Jaden Mickey because they were forced to in that game against USC when Tariq Bracy and Cam Hart were hurt. They had to put Jaden Mickey out there, and it did not go well. He also had a couple snaps there earlier on in the season. I think he gave up a touchdown pretty much every single time. It is a lot to ask of a true freshman. It is a position for grown men. As I've talked about many times before, you got to be able to get in there, stick your nose in the run game. You're going to have to absorb blocks from offensive linemen. You're going to have to guard tight ends in the passing game, some slot receivers as well. It's just a really difficult position to play, but it's so vital to what Notre Dame wants to do on their defense. So Clark gives them the great starting option, but then Hurd is right there in case Clark ever does get hurt again, because as we know, he was hurt throughout last season. His play suffered as a result, even though he was willing to tough it out and stay out there for his team. But now this year, Notre Dame is going to have some options. So even if Jordan Clark has to come off the field, I think you just move Rod Hurd down there. He can play nickel. He's old enough. He's smart enough to learn the defense. I mean, this dude went from Northwestern to Notre Dame. He even said before, like, if you've been in college football this long, like, you kind of know all the coverages. It might be different verbiage, and you might have to learn different calls based on the defensive coordinator. But at the end of the day, if you played over 2,000 snaps of college football, you've probably seen it all. And I think that's the case with Hurd. And that's why he's so valuable to the secondary. Like, he's going to move around, and I think that he was able to pick up on it. Like, unfortunately for Hurd, he wasn't able to participate in spring practice because he was still technically finishing out his degree at Northwestern, but then he was able to join the team full-time in the summer and in preseason camp. And for all the good stuff you heard about Adon Schuler and the practice reports and different things like that, there really wasn't a whole lot said about Rod Hurd. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that he's just not quite the playmaker that Adon Schuler is. And last year, Notre Dame had a very experienced safety in DJ Brown, who was a solid player. He knew where to be. He wasn't bad by any stretch. He wasn't even average. I would consider DJ Brown above average, but he wasn't the playmaker that Notre Dame needed, particularly on the last drive against Ohio State. That's what Schuler brings to the table here. But that being said, it's still great to have Rod Hurd as the third guy coming in, because Notre Dame did not really have a good third safety option last year. Like, they had Ramon Henderson. He wasn't that good for the Irish. I think Hurd elevates that significantly, and that's why he was such a big add in the transfer portal. He's very versatile, and I think that he's going to be able to make some plays as well. He's someone you can absolutely trust when he's out there. And if Schuler makes a mistake, I think Hurd's going to come in and fit in seamlessly. All right, now let's talk a little bit more about Jordan Clark, because he's got some big shoes to fill, right? Notre Dame has been very solid at the nickel position for the past 2 years. Tariq Bracy had a career year when he was the starting nickel for Notre Dame back in 2022, and Thomas Harper, the transfer from Oklahoma State, was awesome last year for Notre Dame. He finished with 39 total tackles, 25 of which were solo, 6 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 3 pass breakups, and a forced fumble. Like, that is a good stat line from a nickel, because you're racking up some tackles, you're getting in the backfield and making some plays with 6 tackles for loss. I mean, my God, Thomas Harper might have had the hit of the season on that poor quarterback on Central Michigan last year. He just came off the edge. No one blocked him. The quarterback did not see him, and Harper flat out laid him out. I remember literally jumping off my couch when he made that play. It was so exhilarating, and I think even though he wasn't the biggest guy on the field, he sure played with a lot of size, it felt like, and he had some really good plays for the Irish, both in the run game and defending the pass as well. I don't think anyone believes that Jordan Clark is going to be an NFL talent, but it's okay. He doesn't have to be. Thomas Harper didn't even get drafted after last season. Now, part of that had to do with the fact that he's had like 1 million shoulder surgeries, but still, the position that what Notre Dame is asking for Jordan Clark out of the position is really not anything extreme. And that's why I think that he can excel in this role for the Irish this year. We've heard about it before. He didn't really have great stats last season, but again, he was playing on an Arizona State defense that was really, really bad. He was injured, and he was asked to do a lot. He was basically like the coach on the field for Arizona State. The only problem is all the guys around him were not very good, okay? That's a lot to ask of anyone. And I think that when he's at Notre Dame, he's just going to have so much more freedom to play and excel in his role. He's not going to be as worried about everyone else on the field, because Notre Dame has Benjamin Morrison. They have Xavier Watts behind him. He can just play free and be aggressive, and I think he's going to have the best season of his career this year with the Irish. And I think some people might take that and be like, whoa, that's a little bit high praise for a guy who wasn't even that good for Arizona State last year. Like, look at Thomas Harper's stats and what he did at Oklahoma State before he came over to Notre Dame. No one was like, wow, Thomas Harper is going to be one of the best players in the Notre Dame defense at the time. And guess what? That's exactly what he was. His absence was certainly felt in that game against Louisville last year when he was out with a concussion. Notre Dame really needed him on the field. The thing is, last year they did not have a good backup nickel option. This year they do, with Rod Hurd. And that's another reason why I think this group as a whole can be even better. Now, if it comes down to a situation where Notre Dame wants to try Carson Hobbs, I think they can do it, but probably not against the bigger teams on the schedule like a Texas A&M, Louisville, Florida State, USC. Like Carson Hobbs is going to have a chance to get out there and get some nickel reps, but I don't really expect that at all in the Texas A&M game, and that is why having Rod Hurd is just so beneficial to this group. Again, the fact that they were so aggressive with Jordan Clark has me thinking the coaching staff really sees something in him, and then adding Hurd to play a position that he had never really played that much before in his career also shows me a level of confidence in the coaching staff, or from the coaching staff in Hurd, that he's going to be able to figure it out and be an asset to this group. They aren't going to be relied upon in the same way that Benjamin Morrison and Xavier Watts are, but these two guys are still going to be very, very important. And don't let the fact that Rod Hurd might not be the starting safety fool you. He's going to be very important for this defense. He's going to be called upon to make some plays, and I think it's going to start in that game against Texas A&M because I don't think he's going to be rattled by the moment. I don't think Jordan Clark is going to be rattled by the moment. And even though I feel great about what Christian Gray and Adon Schuler are going to do this season, it's always great when you have some seasoned veterans out there who've seen it all in college football and can help them out when they need it. Overall, this group has just so much depth, and I'm just so excited to see what they can do and how Mike Mickens moves these pieces around, because this is Mike Mickens' first year coaching the entire secondary. He was a phenomenal cornerbacks coach, but ever since Chris O'Leary left for the Chargers, Mickens took over the whole secondary, and I think that it's going to be beneficial to have one voice in that entire room so that everyone is on the same page all the time, and I think it's going to go a long way for this Notre Dame defense. Obviously, it'd be great to have Chris O'Leary too, but this is the reality of the situation, and I think that Mike Mickens is going to be able to move these guys around and get the absolute most out of this group in his first year coaching the entire secondary. Okay, coming up next, there are a few interesting players in the secondary who probably won't play a ton this season, but their development is going to be crucial to the future of this unit. Today's episode is brought to you by Ibotta. It's summertime, which means it's barbecue season. Stock up on all of your grilling favorites and earn cash back on every purchase when you use Ibotta. So you won't have to choose between burgers or hot dogs. You can get both. Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. You can earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what it is that you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't really amount to much. With Ibotta, you earn cash back that you can withdraw to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Simply add offers in the app, upload your receipt, and voila, the money is yours. You can save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. It's time you join the over 50 million users who use Ibotta to earn cash back every time they shop. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKEDONCollege. Okay, I've talked a lot about the starters. Obviously, those guys are going to have the biggest impact this season, but there's a couple backups who aren't going to have a huge impact this season. At least I don't think they will, but it's very important in the future for these guys to really develop this year for the Irish. All right, so let's start with Leonard Moore. I've talked about him before already. He's going to be the fourth corner, and he has shown enough to get some important reps this season. I'm wondering if Leonard Moore is going to get the same amount of reps, or at least something close to that, compared to what Christian Gray got last season, who played 132 snaps on defense last year. Again, Christian Gray was able to get some time despite the fact that Notre Dame had Benjamin Morrison and Cam Hart in front of him. Two of the best cornerbacks in all of college football. Notre Dame was still willing to put a true freshman out there because he was just that good. And so far, it seems like Leonard Moore is, or at least on the track, to be just as good as Christian Gray. Benjamin Morrison said that Leonard Moore is going to be even better than he has been for Notre Dame. I highly doubt that, but the fact that Benjamin Morrison has that high of praise for Leonard Moore is certainly really encouraging. I think that at the very least, Moore is going to be a great player in a reserve role and could be a big factor on special teams. Then there's Carson Hobbs, the other true freshman corner. I wasn't as high on him coming out of high school, but I did appreciate the fact that he played high school football in Cincinnati. if you've been listening to the show for a long time, you know that we are very pro Ohio high school football. And it seemed like Carson Hobbs was flashing in the summer, but then Leonard Moore really flashed in camp. So I think that Moore is going to get more reps than Carson Hobbs this season. But Hobbs is another guy who could get some reps out there on special teams as well. Marcus Freeman basically called out both of the freshmen in a way at the very start of fall camp. This had to do more with the fact that Chance Tucker, who I haven't talked about at all on this show because I don't think he's going to be a factor this season, he actually suffered a lower leg injury in the Jersey scrimmage. So I don't even know if he's going to be healthy, but it seemed like he had a really rough camp anyway. And Marcus Freeman came out and said that the fourth cornerback job is open and they needed at least one of these freshmen to hit. Well, it looks like they're both going to be hits, but I think Leonard Moore is going to be a hit earlier on than Carson Hobbs. Notre Dame has to replace Clarence Lewis and Micah Bell, two guys who left in the transfer portal. I think if they were still around this season, we wouldn't really hear much about Leonard Moore or Carson Hobbs, but considering those guys are out the door, there is more pressure on these guys to play well in preseason camp. By all accounts, they both did that, and then some. So at safety, Luke Talich is probably the fourth safety right now behind Watts, Schuler, and Hurd. And if you remember, Luke Talich had a scholarship to play at Oregon State, Washington State, and Utah, among others coming out of high school, but he decided to be a preferred walk-on at Notre Dame because he loved the Irish and knew that he would eventually earn a scholarship with his play. He bet on himself, and it worked out. He earned a scholarship, despite the fact that he, I think, missed most of November last year with a broken clavicle. He was a special teams ace, though, as a true freshman. He's 6'4", 208 pounds, so he's got a ton of length as a safety. That's really encouraging, but I still think he's about a year away. He's been building up his frame, and I think that next year he's going to be a big, impactful player for the Irish, but right now he's going to be in more of a reserve role. But again, he's still going to be very important on special teams as well. So all of these guys are going to have an impact on the season, just not so much on the defense. Then there's some guys who I don't think are going to play at all on the defense, but I'm going to be monitoring their development closely. Safeties Ben Minnick, Tay Johnson, Kennedy Urlacher, and Tabron Benny Powell. Johnson, Urlacher, and Benny Powell are all freshmen. Minnick is going to be a redshirt freshman this year. And any one of these guys could be a factor on special teams, but there is more pressure on them now to hit as safeties because, as we've talked about before on the show, Notre Dame has not recruited safety very well. And now, with Ivan Taylor flipping his commitment to Michigan in the class of 2025, they need Johnson, Urlacher, or Benny Powell to hit. Because Notre Dame is going to lose Rod Hurd. They're going to lose Xavier Watts after this season. And sure, they could go out in the portal and get more guys, but it's always better when you can develop in-house. And Tay Johnson was the highest rated recruit out of any of these guys. Minnick has one more year of experience, but these guys need to hit, and they need to show that they're going to be good soon because Jaden Blair is coming. Even though Ivan Taylor is gone, Jaden Blair is a really talented, high four-star prospect for Notre Dame. I think he's a little bit more of a developmental guy, whereas Ivan Taylor could have played earlier on in his college career. And then Notre Dame has some really good corners on the way in Dallas Golden, Mark Zachary. Those two guys are elite high school prospects, so I think they're going to make a name for themselves pretty much immediately once they get to the college game. Notre Dame is probably going to lose Benjamin Morrison after this year. So Golden, Zachary, they're going to be competing with Leonard Moore and Carson Hobbs. And then they got some younger developmental guys coming in as well, and Creed Thomas, Ethan Long, and Brandon Logan. Long and Logan project to play safety. Thomas is more of a corner. So they won't be asked to play very early on in their career, but I think the expectation is for Golden and Zachary to compete right away. But these guys like Johnson and Urlacher and Benny Powell, like they got to start showing it this year, or else these young guys who are coming in are going to have a chance to surpass them as freshmen. So these guys aren't going to have a big impact this year, or at least I don't expect them to outside of Leonard Moore, but they are a very interesting group to follow. And I think it's just so exciting that we can talk about the Notre Dame defensive backs as a strength of this team. And the fact that there's these young guys who, some of which really highly ranked guys coming out of high school, some of them more developmental guys. Either way, they're all going to be competing. And then I think that there's going to be some breakout stars, kind of like it looks like Adon Schuler is going to be. So very good time for the Notre Dame defensive backs right now. I think this is going to be an absolutely outstanding year for the group, and the future is really bright. Okay, that is a wrap for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. I'm going to be right back here tomorrow morning. For your second listen, check out the Locked On College Football Podcast with Spencer McLaughlin. He's doing a ton of good preview stuff to get you ready for the upcoming season. I'm talking conference previews, big game, non-conference. It's all going down there at the Locked On College Football Podcast. So give that a listen. Also remember to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast today. follow, subscribe to the show. Really appreciate all the support leading up to the season. It's going to be a really fun year, man. Can't wait. I'll see you guys tomorrow.